What do you think, Becca?
What is it, John?
It's the new exhibit at the Massillon Museum. They're going to put in my shoes. I mean, don't ignore that bucket. But it has a thing, so, huh?
Did you steal this from somewhere in the
I wouldn't
museum?
call it stealing. It was guarding Nate's jacket. Who cares about Nate's jacket?
Oh my
It's the shoes.
My shoes are better. I'll see you. Yeah.
Enjoy. You're about to watch a panel of coaches on this special edition of Tiger Talk.
Thanks in here.
Do you have one about not punting? You got it!
My name is Scott Ryan. You may know me from Tiger Talk or Massillon Against the World. If you've been watching Tiger Talk, you know that it's been a dark time for the city, that the museum would not allow my shoes to become an exhibit. But tonight, I have made an exhibit myself. Yes, that's my bucket from home. Feel free to take your picture and then let the Massillon Museum know. Nate gets a jacket, but I don't get shoes. It's not right. Becca, what is your opinion of my shoes? Looking good?
I think Nate's jacket is better.
No. So we have some great guests tonight. We want to start with Owens, who is the head coach of Massillon from 1988 to 1991. Owens had 35 wins and 13 losses over 4 seasons. His team captured 2 regional championships, but it says here that his biggest success was signing a book contract with Scott Ryan. That is nice. He's got a new book, Spirit of a Team. It's available tonight, and it covers leadership from CEOs to coaches, including a chapter on our very own Nate Moore. Ladies and gentlemen, Coach Owens.
I'm going to introduce Tom Stacy. Maybe on his way. He wasn't getting out of practice till 5:30. But Tom Stacy was the head coach of Massillon from 2005 to 2008. He compiled a record of 25 wins and 11 losses. In 2005, his team defeated Cleveland St. Ignatius for the first time ever and coached the team to a Division I state runner-up. Shockingly, Tom Stacy went on to open a tattoo parlor where he only gives tattoos that say 3rd and 30.
That's true. We also have tonight Rick Shepas, who was the head coach of Massillon from 1998 to 2004, where he compiled a record of 53 wins and 27 losses. His 1999 team was undefeated during the regular season, was the subject of a documentary, Go Tigers. His 2001 and 2002 teams captured playoff regional championships. He then quit coaching to run Todd Porter's fan club at the Canton Repository. Ladies and gentlemen, Rick Shepas.
Just so you know, Nate makes me watch Go Tigers every year. And finally, Coach Nate Moore is the current head coach of the Massillon Tigers. This is his 11th year as a Tiger, where he has compiled 138 wins and 25 losses, owning more wins there has been ever in previous Massillon coaches. He has 6 playoff regional championships, along with a Division II state championship in 2023. That same year, he was named Ohio Division II Coach of the Year and Max Prep's National Coach of the Year, the first ever in Ohio to do so. But obviously, I think his biggest accomplishment is standing here in white stilettos.
shout out to John Engelhardt from MassillonTigers.com for helping us with the introductions, and then I wrote a part of it too. I wonder if you can guess which was which. Lee, we want to start with you. You wrote a book about leadership, on how you need to succeed in sports or business. What are the real world applications of the game of football, and how does it create leaders?
Can you hear me okay? Is this on? No?
Is it on?
It's on? You can hear all right? Well, if we want to know about leadership, I think we should talk to Mary Lou Wilton, in my opinion. to be the Booster Club president in the history of Massillon Tiger football is quite an accomplishment of leadership. And I can't understand why it's taken so long. And we all know throughout history that women have been by far some of the greatest leaders of countries over time. And women have been some of the greatest CEOs of all time. And I know from personal experience that having a woman leader in your family is really a good thing. And so I just want to congratulate you on that great accomplishment and the leadership you provided to the Booster Club right now. Thank you. Now, on a footnote, everything she knows she learned from her husband Donnie, who was a great Booster Club president. What was the question again?
The question is, how does the game of football create leaders?
You know, next to serving in the military, and I've said this many times, I don't think there's anything more important or more instrumental in the development of the young men in American culture today. And you know, I think back to a few years ago, went through COVID in 2020, and we missed a year of football, and there was thoughts that we may not get it back for quite a while. And I was really worried because I just know for a fact that our culture, our society, we need football. We need young men who have been challenged. We need young men that understands the toughness of the sport, the physicality of the sport, the commitment it takes to play the sport, the sacrifice it takes to play the sport. You know, as you look back through time, so many of the great leaders in our country have been football players, have been guys who've gone on and played and had success, understood what it took to be a part of a team. So, like I said, how does it happen, Scott? How does it happen? It's because of what it takes to play the game, the commitment it takes to play the game, the passion it takes to play the game. You know, you can't play the game of football if you're not committed to it. You can't play the game of football if you don't love it. And those are the kind of things that great leaders have. Confidence to lead, competence to do it right, all are characteristics of leadership. So I'm going to stop right there because I can go on and on, and I have a lot of other questions here tonight. That's my answer. Sorry.
Good job. So we want each of the coaches to discuss a couple of these next topics. And one of the big things when Nate and I came here was managing Massillon McKinley Week. And it was not what you watched on the documentary. It's like 10 times bigger than that. So I just want to start with Coach Shepas because you were our introduction, obviously, to Massillon McKinley Week. What is it? Tell us about managing that week and how you keep the team focused, how you kept the team focused, and how do you manage that week? Because there's really so much more, I know, as a coach that you go through than what the people see, and it really takes a lot of leadership.
Yeah, I mean, I think you manage a week like Massillon McKinley by just understanding the origins and the nature of the game with some reference points maybe to the Ohio State-Michigan game. Back in our area, I'm from Cardinal Mooney, so the Cardinal Mooney-Ursuline game, and I thought I understood rivalry before, when I came here, in a different era. I came from a legendary area where we had deans of coaches who had great respect, and call it what you want, call it great respect, great fear for playing an opponent that was coached by another great leader that they respected, that could prepare for you and beat you on any given, Friday night in high school football, in a very physical, in a demanding area, so coming from that environment, growing with it, understanding that. I thought I understood what rivalry was until I came to Massillon here and got a taste of the Massillon-McKinley rivalry. You know, when Lee talks about leadership, you know, you talk about a belief above all else in what you're conveying to your team. And, you know, and when Lee was talking about, you know, what it's like to be a leader, you know, and why kids should play football, you know, I think kids should play football because they should be around other men who are great leaders, who have an opportunity either on a practice field or in the locker room during the day-to-day of whether it be the weight room, the practices in the summer conditionings, the 7-on-7s, the season, but they get an opportunity to share from the wisdom of those other men, you know, and how those men pass down leadership qualities to them that they then take out on the field and play with, you know. But I will tell you, I was in St. Helens and got a taste of what Massillon-McKinley Week would be right away. You know, I had this nice little speech planned. You know, we did those things over in the Youngstown area, and if some of you guys remember, you know, Kerry Hodak, Becca, and I were, you know, coming into both schools at the same time, and, you know, we feel pretty good about the way we play football over in Youngstown. We always will. You know, we're going to come after you. We're going to put it on you, and we're not going to feel, you know, like we did anything wrong by doing that. You know, so I had this nice little speech planned, and I thought that it'd be nice to introduce myself to Stark County and to the Federal League and to the other coaches that were there that day. And then, you know, Coach was playing to his audience as well, you know, and he was kind of playing to the McKinley guys that were right up here. If I remember it, they were right over here to my right, and I was just sitting here next to the podium minding my own business. And then he kind of, before he went to talk, he was second to the last. Obviously, they left the last for me, and he kind of poked the bear and was kind of like, you know, making a statement to his McKinley folks like they were going to have the upper hand over us as he took over his new realm here at McKinley, which kind of woke up the bear a little bit, and then I ended up having to be myself and let the rest of the audience in Stark County know what I was really about, you know what I mean? Because we never lost the teams from Stark County where I come from, you know what I mean? And I was coming to bring that mindset here, you know, so that's where I started with Massillon-McKinley Week in the preparation. And then the only other way I'll answer that is you prepare for your most important opponents on your schedule. And I'm sure Nate does a great job of this because he's had such great success here. But you go through your schedule as you're prepping in the wintertime and you're getting ready for your spring session and you're planning for your new team. And you're looking at your opponents and how those opponents lay out on that schedule. And so you're saying, okay, this is where we want to be at. This is where we want to be with our weight program and at this point, and how we want to be in a performance zone for this game. Because in week 3, this is a game we have to get. You know, and then you look at the schedule, and in week 7 we've got this team, and that's an important game on our schedule. So we have a plan for that. But every day of every practice, you could always put in a little bit extra for that opponent that you're going to need to beat. So without your team even knowing that they're preparing every week, week in and week out, to play against a team like Camp McKinley, who's a rival that we expect to be here. You know what I mean? They've already been in preparation for the last 10 or 12 weeks anyway during the course of the season. So by the time you got to week 10, right, you're studying the thing on a different level. But your kids are already ready to play without even knowing that. Your coaches know that they've been prepared because you have that good of a plan going in. You know what I mean? And that's as much a part of leadership as anything else, right? It's not luck. It's when preparation meets opportunity, you know, that the end result, you know, is a win. So that'd be my answer for you there, Becca, on that.
Nate?
I'd like to know, can you give us a little taste of how that speech went? I want to know.
I just kind of alluded to it. It wasn't very long. It wasn't very long. If I remember it well, it was my name's Rick Shepas. You'll learn to know about me before long. You know, I'm from Youngstown, and we play the most physical brand of football that they play in Northeastern Ohio. I plan to bring that to Massillon and bring that to every game that we're going to play against every opponent that we see in Stark County and beyond. And I think I sat back down. There was no drop the mic at that time. then they, I did put myself on the radar screen because then there were wanted posters of me with Uncle Sam, which I appreciate to this day, in Stark County everywhere, right, with my face on an Uncle Sam.
Coach, if I may, there's probably people in the audience that were there that night as well as Joel.
Yeah, I'm sure. We were always well represented. That's one of the things that, you gotta remember, I don't know how these guys feel, but, when I came up with this thing, I talk about the respect that Don Bucci in the Youngstown area had for coaches. Mike Currents was one of the most revered men in our locker room at Cardinal Mooney High School. He and Butch had a great relationship. Obviously, I had the utmost respect for Don Bucci. When I was in high school, obviously you've heard this story before, we came down and we would scrimmage, but Butch couldn't say enough about how he felt about Mike Currents, and then obviously, the way Massillon got off the bus when they came to South Stadium when I was a sophomore, I don't think I'll ever forget, 3 waves of, white, orange, and black, because at that time we all had numbers in the program to play sophomore games, right? So there was a sophomore scrimmage, then there was a JV, and then there was a varsity scrimmage. And it was like, holy shit, Massillon getting off the bus, like an army, of organization, and, of course, Coach had them going, and, Rick and Chris Spielman were on the team at that time, and you guys had some great years then too, but, when I decided I wanted to be in coaching more than any other job that I would ever have, would be the job here at Massillon that I was most interested in. It was the one I was most interested in as a player, as a coach preparing for this job. I actually moved and took a job to Pittsburgh at the request of Reverend Hoover to get this job, to come back and take it. So it's the only job that I've really ever, I don't care if I have another job after this, you know what I mean? My time here, my kids' time here, with my wife and I, are treasured. We get to grow up with a live tiger, blessed. What's better than that? You know what I mean? Couldn't be better than that.
Nate, you have to answer. Nice try.
I thought I'd just get Shep going.
I know. I know your tricks.
But no, I think you can be as prepared as humanly possible for this job, but you're never going to be fully prepared, and that goes probably times 10 for the McKinley week. And I still remember that, especially that first year. You're drinking out of a fire hose the entire week. And it can be absolutely overwhelming with all the different things that you have going on. The approach that we've taken, I think, is probably similar to these other guys, is to embrace it because it's there and it's always going to be there, and it's a great thing, and it's such an honor to be a part of. So we embrace all the things that go into the Beat McKinley Week. I think one of the great advantages that we have here is that now that week is different, right? And there's more hype and there's more things going on, but there's a lot of things going on all the time, and there's a lot of juice here all the time. I think if you were 8 miles east and maybe for 9 weeks there's not a whole lot going on, and then you got to go into a week like that, I think that would be a lot more detrimental. So the fact that we have so much interest from our fans, and we have the Booster Club meetings and the Touchdown Club meetings and the downtown rally, that I think our guys are used to the expectations, used to doing those types of things, and I think that makes that transition a lot better. But another thing that I think happens is the kids understand how important that game is to our city and how important that game is to our fans. And I think you have to embrace that. And our kids, when they're out there playing, they're playing for each other. They're certainly playing for their parents and their families. And we hope they're playing for the coaches as well. But there's no doubt that they're playing for the city of Massillon. And everything that goes into that week, everything that goes into the season from our city is so important. People wonder why our kids play so hard. It's because it's so important to them. The expectations are so high. And I think the only way to handle that is to embrace the expectations that our city has for us, and we appreciate those things. I do talking about the McKinley and St. Harold got me thinking. One of my favorite things about that day is they always put the McKinley tables right in front of the podium. And there's like 3 little old ladies from Camp McKinley that sit right at the front, and they really enjoy themselves, through the whole event until I get up to the podium. And then I get the dirtiest looks you've ever seen from these sweet little old ladies. I mean, they just absolutely scowl at me when I'm up there talking. And, that's what makes the rivalry great, is it's that important to people. So I'm not sure what questions I answered there, Scott, but back to you.
Oh, no, we appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, Coach Tom Stacy.
So we've been asking each of the coaches, Coach, tell us about managing Massillon McKinley week and how you do that. How did you do that?
I just came for practice. You asked me about Massillon McKinley. Well, anything I learned from this guy right next to me. And when I became the head coach here in 2005, I knew what to expect. It was a huge advantage for me. When I went in with Lee back in the late 80s, going through the first week, I remember telling Lee towards the end of the week, I said, how in the heck are these guys ready to play? And there were so many distractions, the parade and all the dinners and breakfasts and all that stuff. But the kids were used to it. They were used to all that stuff. They had been through it before. And we had coaches hadn't until I became the head coach. So I knew what I was getting into, but a lot of what I learned in handling the situation, I learned from Lee, and it's always a challenge, but it was obviously it's the greatest high school football game in the country. It's unbelievable.
Can we take a second to congratulate Coach Stacy on that big win against Hillsdale on Saturday? How about the 4th win in a row against St. Ed's? Well done. Chapter 5. Chapter 5 in the book is featured Nate. I don't know how many a chance to get the book or read the book, though. It's pretty awesome what he's going through and his history and Becca, his history together. But it's on a chapter about you got to believe. You got to believe. And it really leads up to the championship game, being on the sideline. And I was like many of you in the stands that didn't believe that kid from Holman was going to drop the ball in the end zone. But Nate did, and his team did. And that's all that's important. He says that in the book. I follow up his feature with Massillon McKinley game of my own. I talk about you have to believe, and I talked about our game when we had lost to them in, what was it, 80, what year was it, 87, 88, 88, and we had lost them like 6 years in a row when I was hired. And basically I was hired, was it 84? We lost
4 years in a row. 4 years.
4 years in a row. Oh yeah, they're going for the drive to 5. Drive to 5. Thanks, James. Leave it to the mayor to get this back straight. But it's we've gone for 5, and I talk about that game a lot, and what I learned during the course of the game. There's no question. As Coach Stacy said, so much going on. My one daughter, Leanne, still talks about one of her greatest thrills growing up in school was riding in that parade and having her schoolmates shout her name as she goes down Lincoln Way. It's just incredible when you think about the impact it had on your children. I've always believed that we try to really, try to keep the players as calm as possible during the course of the week, not riled up, not emotionally. physically, try to save as much energy as possible for the game, because a rivalry game is going to take a little more out of you than the traditional game. And I think that helped a little bit, although it was hard to do because there was a lot of things going on. Particularly hard to do in my first Massillon McKinley game, because as I walked through that visiting locker room for the first time, and they had all those McKinley fans down there in the end zone, and they were throwing biscuits at me and a lot of other things they were throwing at me, and they were shouting things at me that I can't repeat right here in this audience. I realized this wasn't a typical high school football game I was coaching at that particular time.
Unless you're playing Steubenville.
And so I made a decision. I made a decision at the beginning of that game. I said, listen, you know, I'm not going to go out on the field first. This is our stadium. They're going to go out first. Coach McDaniels, he's going to take his team out first. We're not going out first. Official kept coming back to me and said, no, you got to go out first, Coach. They won't leave it to you. I go, I'm not going out. We're not going out. They didn't trade films with them, number one. They didn't have the same quality film we had. Why would I take a poor quality film and give them a good film? That's not right. That's not fair. And the second thing, why do I have to go on the field first? You're the visitor. It's our home stadium. We want the biggest cheer. We're going to go second. I don't know how many were at the game or still remember. We stood there for quite a while. Neither team would take the field for quite a while until right at the very end, as you know, we compromised and kind of both took it at the same time. And obviously they passed a rule now through Ohio Athletic Association that the visiting team always has to take the field first. You know, so we solved that problem. But the game was good, and I'll finish up with this. You gotta believe, you gotta believe. In overtime, when their quarterback threw the ball in the end zone to Alfred Hill, their tight end, I knew he was going to drop it. And I know most of the people in the stands thought he was going to catch that ball for a touchdown, but I just believed, like Nate, it was going to go through his hands, and that Lee Hurst was going to make the field goal to win that game. And Jamie, it happened. It was a great win, and it was a part of it. It's obviously one of the greatest experiences, greatest games I've ever been a part of.
Obviously, part of coaching is winning and working with the students, but you also have a huge staff. And I want to start with Stacy here because he's been on both sides. You've been an assistant coach and a head coach. What leadership skills do you need to have to get alpha men to take your philosophy and get a staff that can help you win? And then I want to hear from each of you how you accomplish that.
You talking about coaching staff?
The coaching staff.
Well, I think the key is you gotta make sure you put the staff together that they're going to provide leadership not only for your players in your community, but are going to be loyal. And one of Lee's great qualities with staff is that he was always loyal to us as assistants, whether it's myself or Greg Gillum or Jim Lektovich, or it didn't matter. You better hire guys that are going to be loyal first and foremost. Obviously, football knowledge and technical knowledge and being able to motivate young men is important. But it's one of the most important things that you do is put together a staff. And I've been fortunate. I think over the 44 years of coaching, the staffs I've been on, I've been so blessed to be on some great coaching staffs. About half of those 44 years with Coach. And some of the staff we had at Massillon was incredible, whether as an assistant or head coach. And, we had some people. I remember I hired Jack Roseback, and I can remember asking Lee about that. Say, what do you think if I hired Jack back as an assistant? And he said, well, great guy, because I hadn't worked with him. And Lee hired Jack when I had left to take the job at Shelby, and Lee said, I can tell you this. He said he'll be loyal to the hill, and he was. And he great football coach. I'm glad I hired him. And we had Steve Kovacs and Scotty Garcia. And all the qualities you need to have a great staff.
Shepas, tell us about getting your philosophy to your staff and how you have to do that.
Yeah, I mean, you're bringing your philosophy in here, and you've got your influences. Obviously, my influences were, like I'd mentioned in the previous question, a little bit where I came from. But I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you how much Mike Curran's influenced me here on how to handle, the kids here, what type of kids we were going to have. And, he's the one guy that mentored me into a pretty radical change from, what I grew up in philosophy. But as far as the vision and what I was fortunate to do, I think while I was here, I think I hired 28 coaches at one time or other within the entire program. And that's how fortunate I was to come in and bring, the opportunity, like Tom had mentioned, to bring in good leaders in, people that were going to be loyal, but people who were also going to understand the commitment, of what they were going to be expected to do. I don't think people realize that the stipends that our guys at Massillon get paid, are pretty significant. There's 3 stipends that are considerably more than most people are going to make at another high school level, and then the other, and I want to say there's about 12 stipends in general. The other 9 stipends are pretty significant as well. They're only $1,000 less than those 3 top stipends. So, I was hiring guys that were going to be above and beyond. I wanted experienced guys, so I wanted a mix. I wanted a mix of guys that were going to understand the locker room. I wanted some age, experience, and wisdom with half that staff, and then I needed some blood and guts guys that were so excited they had a chance to be at Massillon that they would do whatever they would need, to assist us with the program. And some of those things I'm talking about is when Johnny isn't in the weight room and we're about 15 minutes away from our Saturday meeting to watch the film or start our conditioning, right? You start to see coaches run out of the weight room or the locker room because when they know their position group wasn't there, they were obviously, they know what was going to come because of the expectation that we had. And we had to deliver on that expectation as an example to the kids, right? I remember one of my very good friends and one of our very good boosters, Jeff, David, invited me to the Super Bowl. He's a big Broncos fan, and when the Broncos played in the Super Bowl and they beat the Packers and then they beat the Falcons in Atlanta, he wanted me to, he said, you've been working hard, why don't you come on this trip with us? I asked him, when are you going to be back? He said, well, probably Tuesday or Wednesday. I said, I can't go. I said, I got to be in the weight room with our guys on Monday because we lift on Monday. And if I'm not there, the coaches aren't going to understand why I'm not there. The players aren't going to understand why I'm not there. You know what I mean? So my staff was a mix. The buy-in came from my communication of what we were going to do, what we were about to do. When you're the head coach, obviously, and you guys know this, we have the luxury of adapting the style of play offensively, defensively to your team, and you get a chance to do that in the off season so that, if you need to change philosophy to better suit your team, when you call up another college or university and say you're the Massillon coach, they're going to invite you in for spring practice and you can go do that. We went from a tight front, with a 6'5" defense on the goal line. We started to play Frank Beamer's, Bud Foster's, 4 defense where they were playing half coverage with their corners and they put their safety down in the box. Well, we felt we had those guys to do that at that time, so we were able to change and do that. So we needed to have guys that were adaptable, guys that wanted to go study that football. But we had the opportunity to do that because we were at Massillon, because Massillon afforded that opportunity, for those resources. So that's how I was able to do it here. And then we did a lot of team bonding stuff too. I mentioned, I don't know if you guys did this, but we rafted the New River. That was one of the things that we wanted to do. That was actually in honor of Stu after he had passed away. We were planning to do that in the spring as one of our staff bonding trips. We went down there and got steaks, from the West End, they season out the steaks. We took a bunch of ribeyes and about 10 cases of beer down to the New River, and it happened to rain, but Stu wanted to raft the New River, so we did that. We did a bike canoe up the Tusk here. We started at Ernie's, we biked up and we canoed back. You know what I mean? But our staff was close. We got a lot of good things done. And the one guy that I would mention that I really appreciate who's now working with Nate is Brian Patches, Bubba Patches, right? Bubba was I had coaches like this, right? I would have Bubba start at the 8th grade. He was a good organizer. He was good with the parents. He would raise a team up 7th and 8th grade and then come up with the 9th grade and start as a sophomore. Then I'd go back, and if I felt good about that next group that was coming through, I actually asked Bubba to go back down and bring another group back up for us, which is a team that Tom ended up, working with, when I left, but when you have guys that are willing to make sacrifices and put their egos aside, we had a lot of that going on too. And they're all great leaders now. They're all in great positions. They're all leading school districts and our head coaches are doing some great things. So we took great pride into what we were, the kind of people we were putting around, the kids. But it was 24/7 all day. You had to be in Massillon building this program, being around kids.
Great. Nate?
Yeah, I think a lot of similarities with what these guys have said. One of the things that I always say when I'm talking to especially other coaches is when I'm meeting with a potential candidate to fill a coaching vacancy that we have, if I don't get the feeling that I would like to go down to Bender's and have a Pepsi with this guy, I don't care what he knows about football. I just don't care. The camaraderie on your staff is so important, right? Alignment on your staff is so important. So, like, part of, how do you get alignment with these guys is I think you have to hire right first. The most important part of that is what kind of guy are they, right? Like, we spend so much time together, and sometimes we're all working together to get something done. Sometimes we're going to battle against each other to try to solve a problem and trying to figure out who's got the best idea. And you got to have guys that can handle both those situations right. And if you get a guy like that, then like you can get him the resources to learn what he needs to learn, right? From the football standpoint, like you can develop him like that. But if he's not a guy you want to go down to Bender's and have a Pepsi with, like, you're not fixing that, right? So that's really, and there's been just a couple times in my career where I've thought, you know what, maybe I'm going to take a chance on this guy, and I always regret it.
Yeah, I agree, Scott. There's part of this character, just hire good people, surround yourself with good people. And when you do that, good people with good, morals and values and work ethic, they attract other good people and good players. That's the first part of it. That was the thing that there was no compromise on that. But the other thing, just in leadership, real quick, and I'll finish up, is that it's really also important on your staff to hire guys who know more than you do about things you can't know at all. You can't know about every position, no offense, defense, special teams. So it's really important for me to find those guys out there that have the ability to do things with the players or for the players that I didn't have to do. John Maxwell defines leadership as the ability to move an individual or a team from here to there in a positive way, a positive influence of a person or a team in one direction. And, I go back to Coach Stacy here. When we're in Akron and we hire this young skinny kid, or we recruit, not hire, this young skinny quarterback from Wilder, Ohio, named Charlie Fry, who could barely take a snap when he first got under center in practice. And we throw him in there with our quarterback coach, and 5 years later, he's a third-round draft pick for the Cleveland Browns. He was able to take that player from here to there because of his ability. Or if he's the offensive coordinator and you see him put that whole offense together, and they're struggling a little bit early, but they find a few things, and all of a sudden he gets that whole team believing in himself and what they're doing, great run, pass balance, and they go from here to there. If it's in the weight room, Coach Stu, you put a young player in there with Coach Stu, a whole lot more about lifting weights than I did, but he takes a guy who's not very strong, not very, developed, and doesn't have a lot of confidence, and you see him as a freshman or sophomore. Next thing you know, there's a couple years in that weight room with Coach Stu. Look what you got to work with. So just finding those guys who are able to take teams' positions in a positive direction. So that's the leadership aspect of your staff, I think.
So Massillon Against the World is kind of a new battle cry, maybe, or a new era that from many other teams. I'm just curious how each of you dealt with the concept Did you feel like it was Massillon against the world? And how did you work your staff through that? Like, did you feel like you had a target on your back? Or did you feel like, I mean, did you not feel that? Is that just something that came about, you know, from Go Tigers on, or is that something that you dealt with? So I'll start with you, Lee, and work down.
Yes. You know, we have what they don't have. They want what we have. And they have made the commitment, they don't have the fans, they don't have the tradition that we have, and they never will. Yes, we have a target on our back.
Yeah.
Stacy?
Yeah, I think there's some truth to that. But the thing, especially when I was coaching with Lee, is Lee was so well respected in the state of Ohio that you had guys that were either jealous of him or guys that were supportive of him because they knew who he really was and what he was all about, and he knew he was going to come here and do the right things. He was going to win, but he's going to do it the right way. So in that essence, you know, you had people that were against you, but there was a lot more that were, I think, for us because of his leadership and who he was than people might think. And that was my own feeling. And I got that throughout the state. If we go to clinics or we go watch Ohio State practice, whatever, we run into coaches, you could tell there were guys out there who were pulling for us because Coach was doing things the right way. He was winning, but he was doing it the right way, and that was important to them. It's kind of like the Cleveland Browns need to win. That's important to football. The Green Bay Packers need to win. That's important to football. Ohio State needs to win. Massillon needs to win. That's important to high school football in Ohio. And Lee won, but he did it the right way too. And that's just the way I felt about it.
Shepas?
Yeah, I don't know if I remember, you know, when I didn't feel that way. I mean, I was on high school teams like that. You know, we were, say what you want, you know, revered, feared, whatever, you know, so, I mean, Massillon's no different. I don't think I put much care in it. You know, I spent too much time concerned with what we were gonna do here with our program to notice any of the other things. And, you know, what mattered most was what was going on with our kids here and what we were doing to prepare them week in and week out. And to be honest with you, you know, never really cared about the film exchange, what we were wearing that day. You know what I mean? It's always gonna be a good day. To be honest with you, I guess because I grew up with that, you know, I'm a Raider fan too, by the way, old school. You know, Al Davis, you know, just win, baby. So, you know, I mean, land the misfit toys and all that goes with it. You know, I don't mind being the underdog, but you know, it's a good place to be either way.
You're not from Youngstown, are you?
Hey, Nebo Park. Nebo.
Says enough.
Yeah, right.
I mean, Massillon against the world is it's still alive and well. There's no doubt about that. I think you know, two things. The first thing is the further and further you get away from, we'll say Massillon, but really Stark County, the more respect that people have for Massillon football, our program, our tradition. You know, I think statewide, I think there's a lot of respect. But you know, the people that we see on a more regular basis, you know, that's kind of where, you know, the Massillon against the world, maybe that could be changed, you know, the verbiage of that, but you know, we'll take the world. But you know, I think that our kids, and I think our coaches too, probably, because we have a lot of Massillon alumni, like we really see that as a badge of honor. Like there's a reason why the people don't like us, right? And it's not because we're not good at what we do. It's not because we don't play the game the right way. It's not for any of those reasons. And for whatever reason it is, I mean, that's really up to them. But we see it as a badge of honor, that it's confirmation that we're doing things the right way. You know, if we went to St. Harry Lombros and everything was, you know, kissing babies and handshakes and hugs and they're all the way around. Like, I don't know that anybody would enjoy that either. Like, you know, so, you know, we're fine with Massillon against the world.
Just real quick, Scott, just a thought in your mind.
I would love it.
Last year I had a chance to go in the Ohio High School Coaches Hall of Fame. And so there's a lot of high school coaches going in and we're represented by a lot of high school folks. Many of you were there, Coach Stacy was there. And so everybody had their person go up and do the induction speech. And most guys went up and did a pretty good job, but only the Massillon Booster Club president, Raleigh Layfield, walks to the podium in an orange blazer. The pride we have for our program, the pride we have for Massillon is just like unlike anywhere else. And I just think there is a jealousy that you just don't have that same level of pride. And it was just an example I thought of.
I love that. Pretty soon we're going to open it up for questions, so start thinking. This is going to be my last question. Each one of you on this panel has been responsible for my best day of the year and my worst day of the year. And I'm going to give you each the chance to talk about maybe the best game, a game when you had a great win that really sticks with you, or maybe the other side, the loss that sticks with you. But I'd like you to each single out one game that you coached and just give us a little taste of it. We'll start with you, Lee, and we'll just go straight down, and then we'll take some questions from the audience.
You know, the great games, you have a tendency to just gloss over. Unfortunately, those tough games stick with you, and you just can't get rid of them. There's no question. My last game I coached here was by far the toughest game I've ever coached anywhere at any time. I have still not been able to look at the tape of the Ignatius game. We lost 14-13 in the rubber ball.
All right, that's it, folks. That's fine.
That's why everybody hates the rubber ball.
Hey.
You keep telling that story. I'm trying to get our guys to win in the rubber ball because that's what we're going to play, and that's where we're going to play. And they're still pissed that you lost 14. And then the story Earl tells about the running back that got out of jail to play against Niles. And the rubber ball. I mean, the rubber ball is interesting. I remember being a fan. Right, I prepared for this job for 4 years prior to, and Jack decided to go 241 to get to the rubber bowl. There's a story. There's a lesson for every coach in this, right? So I'm like, hey, this is awesome. We talk about who's taking the field first. McKinley's out there in pregame. They're in pregame. What's going on? The crowd's starting to get stirred. Where's Massillon? Where's Massillon? I'm like, okay. Hey, they warmed up back at Massillon. He's going to come out here and take the field and beat their ass. And the bus got caught in traffic. So he actually wasn't at the rubber bowl. You know what I mean? Hey, I went up 21 every time. Every time. I went there. In the rubber bowl, I went down. I came down here and went up 21 and came into Akron off Lodi. Every time. There's no traffic. No traffic, right into the bottom. Yeah. So.
Stacy, do you got a game?
My favorite, obviously most disappointing, was the 2005 state championship game. Shouldn't have punted the ball before the half. But
We forgot about
that. My favorite game though was the 2005 playoff game against McKinley. And we had lost. We were both 9-0, week 10, and lost it over at Phil Glick would call Spigot Stadium. But getting ready for the game, I thought we had a great plan, offense and defense, and our guys like Troy Ellis, Brian Gamble, Antonio James, Andrew Daly, Bobby Hoop, they're like, Coach, we're not getting beat twice by McKinley in 1 year. It's not gonna happen. And our kids really played well. And it was 23-3 or something like that. I don't remember what the final score was, but we dominated the game even more than that. But I can remember calling my dad. He was out of town with my mom on some kind of vacation. I remember calling him at the north end of the Rubber Bowl. Coach remembers that with the big game. And he says, "You beat him how much?" He says, "Man, you must have played well." But that was my favorite game here.
Shepas, did you have a game for you?
Yeah, I mean, I have a couple that come to my mind, 3 of them, oh, I got you. I think they can hear me pretty good though. But, yeah, I just have a fondness for figuring out our identity. In the first year we played McKinley over here. We lined up against, a who's who of players on McKinley. They had Kenny Peterson and Mike Dost, Jameer Martin and all those guys. And it was a good team. They were coming off of a great year. But we found our identity. We found our quarterback in that game, and had not gotten hurt. I thought that led to a win the town would remember, obviously, in the movie where we went and beat McKinley over there 35 to 7. But I think I'm most proud of the way we prepped for that first game. We too had Steve Kovacs on staff. Having him on staff proved to be a great asset. Just figuring out, coming up with a new offensive style just to go against their sets. Right? We were able to dictate their sets, able to dictate their coverage. In every circumstance. So, yeah, that first McKinley game, I think I would say for me, and it was a loss, but we knew we were there, and had Irwin not gotten hurt in the fourth quarter, we beat him right out of the gate. We beat him with all those good players. We were right there. They had to block a punt to get us at the end. So.
Yeah, first one is 2015 Massillon McKinley, the loss. It's absolutely devastating. It's absolutely devastating, and that's not the reason that we've won. Yeah, it doesn't exactly work like that, but it does put it in perspective. How bad it can be, which is pretty bad. You got to wear that thing for 364 days, and it's no fun. Another one would definitely be the 2018 state championship. As good as that Owens team was, you can't tell me that if we're not at full strength and we have Jameer Thomas in the backfield that we don't win that one in 2018.
Yeah, I remember all those. Who else has a question? Anyone have a question? Logan, you have a question? He works there. Is that cheating?
So this is a question for Lee. I was recently watching the Timeless Rivals documentary that came out in 2017. And in that documentary, you said that when your daughter was presented with cheerleader pom-poms or something along those lines in the bassinet, you explicitly asked for that football. How do you feel today knowing that girls have the opportunity to play flag football here in Massillon?
I think it's awesome. Wow, what a great opportunity that. And I don't know if it was Raleigh or which booster club president it was that came down the hallway with the pom-poms and was like, no, you take those back and you find a football just like all the little boys in town get. She's now, by the way, married to the head football coach at Shelby, and he has his team #1 in the state right now, so she's a pretty good coach.
Someone have a question?
Hi, Coach. Brad Backus, 1988. That was the first McKinley game. So my question is, statement first, I think any true football fan knows the play rivalry 88. I want to know, do you remember what you called the play that we put in for the McKinley game the senior year where Jamie threw the touchdown pass to Doug Herrick?
Stacy can help me. He's left-handed.
Yeah, something reverse.
49 reverse pass, I think. But is that close? 9 to 49.
9:49. Since I have the microphone, I have a question. So, last summer, a gentleman wrote me
couple letters from the Toledo area. He claims that he wrote Coach Owens anonymous letters making reference to running that play in the McKinley game. I wanted to know, how true is that? Did he have any influence in these anonymous letters to run that play, or was that you?
I can't tell you how many anonymous letters I got.
They still come. They still
You still
come.
get those?
He still gets them. He's got the door.
Oh, what's that guy's name? I think I know who you're talking about.
Why would you guys open an anonymous letter?
I actually have every letter that anybody has ever sent me,
Yeah.
especially the anonymous ones, are in a file in my desk.
Yeah.
And one day we'll be.
And one day they're going in the book.
But do you know a publisher name?
Can
Can you find a publisher? No.
Yeah.
Okay, my question for those college coaches up here. Your experiences at Massillon, is there anything there that helped prepare you to coach at the college level?
Oh, yeah, I mean, the problem is you don't have the same size of crowd, so. Even when we were at Akron, believe it or not, in Division I. No, there was obviously the level of play and the technical aspect of the game at the college level is higher than high school level. There's no question about that. I mean, I found that out when I went from Shelby High School to the University of Akron coaching Division I. I got my eyes open in a hurry, but coach was patient with me. Offensive coordinator Paul Winters at Akron at the time was patient, and I learned as I went. But we learned a lot of things in Massillon too that helped us for college. I think for me it was more of how to handle players from different backgrounds, more so than the technical aspect. Different aspects or different backgrounds in life, and going to the college level. I think that probably helped me, at this job, helped me at the college level more than anything.
I got asked that question yesterday. I was doing a podcast for the book, and the guy runs for businesses basically, and it was about handling pressure. And I thought at that time, answering the question, I would say just the ability to handle pressure and know how to handle pressure. I don't think there's a better place to learn that than Massillon Tigers. You know, you talk to any guys that been in that Massillon game, and it's as big as any game out there. I had a chance to go from here to Ohio State and experience the Ohio State Michigan game is basically as assistant coach. But I don't think it was the same. And you've heard old Bruce say that, you've heard Chris Spielman say that. It's just a different level of pressure that you have to deal. You live right here in this community. And it's just so important to everyone here in this community. And learning to deal with that and being able to put it aside and stay focused and not allow that pressure to impact the decisions that you make and stay on track. I think that was helpful, because even at the college level, I mean, there's pressure everywhere, no matter where you coach at, but the lessons here on handling pressure, I think, were really important.
Yeah, I mean, I dealt with big roster sizes, where I was in small college, managing 100 rosters of 145, 150. I mean, Massillon, clearly, because our numbers were good here then, and I thought we were pretty efficient in how we managed practice and, the system we were able to run, preparing 2-platoon system. I mean, biggest thing about college, that's like the clock, going from 12 minutes to 15 minutes is an eternity. And when you're trying to manage a game and you're looking at matchups, I think that, just like in basketball, obviously football's a matchup game too. And, I know in the preparation, I always try to focus on the matchups, because the matchups told me how to call the game. If I felt like our defensive guys felt good about their prep, good about their game plan, good about their matchup, I know I could play the game tight to the vest. It becomes a clock management game. You're going to score your points. You know what I mean? But at the same time, I also felt that, you know, if you didn't like your matchups and you didn't know if you were gonna go score for score, then, you know, you had to light it up. You had to turn it, you know, take the governor off the offense and the play call and get as aggressive as you possibly could, you know, which we did. I do agree about the pressure, although obviously, you know, I think you have to, I mean, you're wired one way or the other, you know. Probably Coach Stacy mentioned it the best, you know. My experience has helped wire me for, you know, circumstances like this.
Yeah, you know, on top of that pressure goes something we just talked about a little ago, is the rivalry part of it. You know, Coach Stacy will tell you the success we had handling the rivalry when we were at Akron against Kent State. We were 7-2 against them. Neither one of us was very good, but we won 7 times, they won twice. But one of our players from Ashland's here, John Connor, will tell you, when we played Finley, it was a different deal. We made that a huge rivalry, and I think we ended up 14-3 against Finley, and that was a huge rivalry for us. So the lessons I learned here, not only pressure, which comes with the rivalry game, but to be able to handle that rivalry game, which is really important in building any program at any level, and particularly at the collegiate level.
Anyone else have a, oh, we got one right back here.
You guys know me, Betsy Studer. I was thinking back a long time ago when we lived on Erdel, and Coach Morano started having, well, Chris Spielman and Rick Spielman used to work out in our garage. And Morano said, hey, why don't you come to high school and start lifting? It was the old high school with boys. And so Steve did that. And, but Lee, were you the one then when you came that you finally hired him, and it was probably one of the first strength coaches in probably anywhere?
Yeah, I don't think anyone else really in and around the state had a strength coach, and obviously all the colleges had strength coaches at that time, but it was a bonus for us. It made a difference in our program. We were always looking for things to get an edge, and I think that was huge. Don't you, Tom?
Oh, absolutely.
It was big. The job they did, you know, ability to be stronger, develop the players that we had, it was huge. So,
Made a big difference in our lives too.
Yeah, I'm sure of that.
All right, well, thank you guys so much. I just want to say each of you let me and my dad go to a game together and have a Friday night, and it meant a lot to me. So I want to thank you, and I think everyone here feels the same way. So, thank you so much.
I just want to close by saying thank you to each of you too, because you each created a path and set a bar for Nate and I to follow. And I think that's like so important as a coach and a coach's wife, and now I'm coaching girls flag football. It's just important to have men like you know, setting the example for us that we can look at in the history. And you know, you guys all continue to coach, or you're talking now, and you've written a book. And Coach Shepas is at Warren, and he's got girls flag football going there too. So it's very exciting to see what you've done in Massillon and the ties that we still have with a Barbarian from Ashland, and you've done a great job. And so from my perspective, I just thank you because you've made it easier for me and I feel like, to just kind of keep living this dream, and we thank you a lot.
We would just ask that, you know, if we invite it back again, do we really have to go over Nate's whole record? And state championship?
That's the only way you would show up. So we're going to grab a quick picture of all of us, and then we'll do a signing. And thank you guys for coming out.
So I assume you're keeping this?
Scott, I think it's time for them to go.
Even the bucket?
Especially the bucket.